Bertram watched the railway. Bertram the Old Warrior was a very special engine, but to make everything go like clockwork, and the other engines thought that Bertram was a very special engine indeed. But one night, Bertram was not enjoying his company at the sheds. The other engines were teasing him, especially Mike and Billy. "Why not sew a proper engine?" teased Billy. "What do you mean?" asked Bertram. "You seem to be breaking down all the time," said Mike. "No wonder the other railway brought you to this railway for a reason," he said. Your firebox might be fizzling and making you break down all the time," he said. "I never break down," snapped Bertram. I am a reliable engine." "More like unreliable," laughed Billy. "That's enough," shouted Duke. "Can't you two just leave him alone for goodness sake?" he said. You two are just acting silly and not making any sense," he said crossly. "Why don't you two just snap out of it and leave the poor fellow to it?" he said. And both Mike and Billy remained quiet for the rest of the night. Bertram felt a little bit down. "Duke," he said, "what if it was true?" "Don't listen to what they're saying," said Duke. They used to tease me a lot too, you know," he said. But they would teach the lesson in the end. They'll think of the same thing to you," he said. "Well, I hope you're right," said Bertram. But he went to sleep, feeling very unhappy. The next morning, Bertram was pulling a bright, lovely coat when Billy puffed up. He had some other teasing to do. "Hey," said Billy, you look awful. Maybe that's the way you've been painted," he said. What a silly engine you are, being called the Old Warrior." That is not. I am not that name for a silly reason," said Bertram. "I'm a brave engine, and you just don't understand." "Oh," said Billy, perhaps you might get sent away someday, or being taken to pieces." Bertram had had enough. He then puffed away, feeling very cross, leaving Billy behind. The next day, Bertram was to take some garbage to the waste dump. Billy had just sauntered in towards Bertram, and Bertram was coupled up. "Enjoy your trip to the dump, smelly boiler," teased Billy. Bertram completely ignored Billy and set off to work. "I may be old," he said to himself, but that doesn't mean I can slow myself down," he said to himself, and he puffed away. Meanwhile, Mike was pulling the flying tipper instead of Henry, since Henry was away for a while. Mike began feeling very anxious. He began going faster and not paying attention to the rails. He was too busy thinking about Bertram. "He's too much," scoffed Mike to himself. "He just thinks he's perfect, but he's not," he said to himself. "Just stop forcing your ways on him," said his driver. "He's just a nice engine, and you don't know that." Mike did not know, but then he was still going too fast. His driver even tried to apply the brakes, but Mike wouldn't let him. He went violently down the hill, thinking he could go fast. "Slow down, Mike," he said. "You don't want to cause another crash again." But Mike didn't listen. He was too busy racing down the line, thinking he could get rid of Bertram someday. He went through the main line, and then it happened. Mike stopped. He He stopped and felt very surprised. "What's going on?" he asked. His driver looked in his tank. "You have run out of water," he said. "Now another engine will have to help you." Mike was not happy about this. His driver and fireman telephoned for help. Just then, Bertram was still at the yards when the yard manager arrived to see him. "Mike has broken down with the flying kipper, and I want you to help him." But said Bertram, "he's been rude to me this whole time, and why should I help him?" "I'm sorry, Bertram," said the yard manager. "Mike may have been offensive to you, but it's time you have to help him. I hope this will change his ways." Bertram hoped the yard manager was right, and he puffed away. Soon, Bertram backed up towards Mike. "Broken down, have you?" teased Bertram. "Shut up!" shouted Mike, and Bertram was coupled up. At last, he had rescued Mike and the flying kipper, and they both made it to the docks just in time. The flying kipper was delivered. Mike didn't even dare to say thank you to Bertram, but Bertram kindly said goodbye. Mike still had a lot to learn. He was very cross indeed of what's been happening today, and he knew the Fat Controller was not going to be happy with him at all.